member for any questions he may have.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and I again appreciate your testimony and appreciate all the work that you put on the bill, and I appreciate the reassurance that the committee is taking seriously the reports of cost overruns. But I got to tell you, that's not the first time I've heard that, and I'm not a betting man, but I'm willing to bet that in a few months from now or a year from now, we're going to find out we're going to find more reports of massive and egregious cost overruns. And again, I do think that there ought to be a complete audit. Other agencies have to do it. I just think it's everybody. My friends who are fiscally responsible, it would seem to me that that would be a smart thing to do. And the reason why it bothers me so much, not just because it's a waste of taxpayers' money, but because when we find out that somebody gets $1 more in SNAP benefits, it's like, the end of the world. And we have people calling for deep cuts in programs to provide food benefits to people. We're going through an appropriations process, as I mentioned in my opening statement, where WIC is being cut. Support for Women's, Infants, and Children program is being cut. I mean, and we're told that that has to happen in the name of fiscal responsibility, and yet I don't think the Pentagon budget is held to the same standard. And it bothers me because at the end of the day, when I define national security, it includes the quality of life for the people who live in this country. And so I look forward to, continuing to watch the oversight to make sure that, there's a minimal amount of fraud, waste, and abuse. I also support, the effort to help Ukraine ward off Russian aggression. I will say that I have an issue, and before I get to that, let me just say, you mentioned President Biden advocated a higher military budget. I don't agree with him on everything. I didn't agree with him on that.
I didn't either.
Yeah. So
You want to make a list?
yeah. So, but I'll go back to Ukraine. There are many of us who who support providing help to the Ukrainians to push back Russian aggression. I was part of the first delegation to go to Ukraine with Speaker Pelosi over a year ago, and I learned firsthand about the atrocities that are being committed against Ukrainian people by the Russians. However, I'm not in alignment with the president on using cluster munitions. I know there's a division in our caucus, and I think there's even some Republicans who may not think that that is a good use of it's not a wise choice. And we can argue that. There is an amendment to debate this issue and to let members vote up or down on it. I don't know whether either of you have an opinion of whether or not the House should be able to debate the issue of cluster munitions or not. But if you have an opinion, I'd love to hear it.
It's fine with me. Fine with me too. I mean, I think.
Good. Then I hope
Yeah.
it's made in order, and we'll be able to have that debate and that vote. And the final thing, and again, I told you my concerns about the bill, just in terms of the number. But there are news reports out today. I'm just reading a CNN report that the House GOP leaders are confronting a legislative landmine over a massive defense bill on as right-wing lawmakers are pushing for a slew of hot-button amendments that would put moderate Republicans in a complicated position and threaten Democratic support for a must-pass bill. I mean, you mentioned it, Mr. Smith, briefly, but I mean, it's not just issues on the LGBTQI plus community. It's issues that would further restrict access to reproductive health care for service members. Obviously, target diversity and inclusion initiatives. I'm not sure how they're going to decide all this at the end, but are you concerned that the Democrats who normally would support this, if these things get attached to it, if it becomes a Christmas tree on hot-button issues that satisfy the most extreme elements on the right that somehow that may make it impossible for some Democrats to support this bill?
Well, two things to that. First of all, let me say, having been through this process many times, I am concerned pretty much every step of the way. I mean, we got to get it out. We got to get it out of committee. Well, how do you strike that balance? All right, we got to get it through the Rules Committee. How do you strike that balance? Okay, what amendments passed? What amendments didn't pass? What was in order? Constantly, we both worry about this constantly. And I will say, and we work together on it. And we're both like, okay, how do we get the votes? What do we do? So. Yes, is the short answer. And look, I mean, there's, as you know, there's 1,500 amendments. Nothing that is ruled in order is going to cause me to, well, I suppose if it was nothing but Republican amendments rules in order and there was no balance there, but that's about the rule. It's a matter of what passes on the floor. And look, I mean, there's, I don't know how many, but there's several dozen, I would guess, amendments that if they pass would make it problematic. And I'm sure the same was, many times true on the Republican side. It's the reality that the party in power decides what amendments you debate and has greater control over which ones pass. And if it goes too far and it is no longer what I feel is a bipartisan bill, then we'll have to deal with that. But we trust all of your judgment to make sure that we get to a good place on that and we get something in the neighborhood of the bipartisan bill that we passed out of committee. Now, look, what we always say on this, too, no matter how this bill comes out, there's going to be stuff in there the Democrats don't like and there's going to be stuff in there the Republicans don't like. I mean, it is a bipartisan, bicameral, signed by the president process. There is no way to do that where one party gets everything they want and likes everything in the bill. It doesn't work that way. It's a balance. I've always referred to it as sort of a tapestry. It's like you look at the whole picture. It's not any one thing. But yes, we will absolutely have to look at the whole picture as those amendments pass. There are a number of amendments here that are deeply troubling if they pass. And that will have to factor into my calculation, and I think every member's calculation. When they decide how to vote, and we're going to try to make sure that we get to the place where we can have a bipartisan vote on this bill as possible.
Yeah, and the hope would be that obviously some of these controversial amendments might not be able to pass on their own. So the concern would be that again, I have no idea because I'm not in on the private discussions between the Freedom Caucus and the leadership here, but I do worry about self-executing amendments and when the rule passes that all of a sudden these things are a part of the base bill as a way to protect moderate members from not having to take a tough vote or to assure that the extreme right wing that you don't have to worry about losing a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and say, I mean, look, it's a decision that you all have to make and the Republican leadership has to make. This bill needs to be bipartisan to pass. That was true when we were running the place, and it's true when you're running the place, and I hope we'll take that into consideration as we're working through this.
I appreciate you both being here. Thank you for your work. I yield back.